Students out of these 4,000, what percentage of students actually work on more theoretical parts? Because like in my department in Kharagpur, out of say 65, 70 students, hardly 4 of us are working in like theory algorithms.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting about the interview process. So the funny thing is this, although these students are being hired to work in areas that involve things like data sciences and so forth, when they're interviewed, the questions that they are all asked are algorithms questions. They're all, they sit these guys down and they give them a problem, they say, you know, solve this problem, and it will usually be solvable by some like dynamic programming or some kind of greedy solution or something like this. So the students that really want to get the better jobs, like if you want to get a job at Google, you have to take the algorithms class because that is where the interview questions, you know, usually come from for these classes. Now the funny thing is, once you get hired at Google, they're not having you do algorithms. That is just the gateway to getting the getting the job.
Yeah, they often ask you questions that are quizzes.
That's right, they really are.
So the algorithm course must be very popular, but how many graduate students are working in like hardcore algorithm?
In our department, I would say, yeah, I mean, so algorithms is maybe 1 out of, you know, maybe 7 of the strengths of the department. And so maybe it's about that same fraction. So it's not smaller, but it's, let's say, just representative of the different areas. But I would say if you look at our applicants, most students, you know, you ask them, what is it you want to do? Most of them want to do machine learning, you know, yes, you know, neural nets. These are the hot topics that everybody mentions these days. But when they come, they find they can't all do that, you know, because we don't have that many faculty here, you know, working in these areas.
And how about the recent craze is deep learning?
Deep learning, exactly, yeah.
No, Israel is a bit different because Israel, the main strength of Israel in computer science is theoretical computer science. So there still is a large portion of the students do theoretical work, still study algorithms, and but we also
do people work in system sciences, operating system, compilers, architecture?
Yeah.
They do.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So we have groups. We have large groups in programming languages and compilers. We have another large group in, you know, we call systems. So systems in general includes operating systems, you know, networking, you know, let's say a number of things that sort of, you know, it kind of also kind of goes off in the area of security because, of course, in systems and networking, you know, security is a big issue. So there's a very large systems group as well that kind of covers this whole area of operating systems, networking, and security in general.
What is the difference between here education system and the education system in US?
The difference between what?
Here and your place, for example.
Oh, you guys are so, I guess.
No, because he can say about their place, but not our place.
Does your master program include writing the thesis, or is it?
Yes, they have a 6 months project semester in which they will have to take up a problem, solve it, and then make a thesis out of it.
I will tell you that's very important.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're interested in, if any of you are interested in applying to, let's say, PhD programs, you know, in, you know, outside, having research experience is considered, you know, essentially a requirement for these things. And you'll always look to see that you've at least done, you know, a thesis, and if possible, if you have that thesis, you know, appear in publication, if you've had that appear in a conference or something like that. That is actually, you know, the kind of thing that we look for when we are looking for our PhD students.
What I started usually advise them go for MTech program in IIT.
Go for what now?
MTech, Master's
Okay.
MTech, that is in IIT. And then they will be able to get more courses, and then they will improve themselves, and they will be also in a position to decide whether to go for research or go to the industry. So I think for them needs some intermediate step. Direct applying to US will be will not be a very good idea, because then they have to pay whole money, and then even the GID score and others.
I see. That's
So one more year or so. IIT is basically 1 year, 2-year course, but this is essentially 1 year course. They claim the first year they study. So the second year they only study which industry is coming for hiring. So they are always talking about hiring and who is coming. So all these companies coming. So basically after 1 year they will have a much, here we don't have so many wide level range of course, right? Because of the restricted faculty. They will have a much wide range of course in IIT system. Much better exposed to have going to a system like US. So I always tell them, you go in the intermediate path.
One of our students went to Israel. Weizmann?
So we went
Computational Geometry, is working in Computational Geometry. Sujoy Bo, right. He is working with
he was in my university, not in
sorry.
So
that's a mistake then.
Yeah,
Is it just a place?
he did a PhD with my colleague, Professor Paz, and I know him quite well.
I'm sorry for the misinformation.
It's fine. But so he was.
Yeah, he was here. He was student here.
Which year?
For 2012, 2014.
Yeah, so we just graduated.
So here's an example that you can quote in Israel. Ben-Gurion University.
So he has already known the bridge.
Any question?
In fact, just as you did, I also discouraged him. But then he was quite enterprising and he said, no man, I will try.
But if you have a motivation, you cover it up, right?
Yeah.
If you have a will that I will study and I will do anything and everything.
Actually, a lot of energy is spent in planning to go. Now that's a difficult part. Actually, after that they will again have to get suited to the environment. So unless the guy is very good in academics, immediately launching to the foreign soil may not be welcome.
For them, but here an exception. We were saying something?
Instruction here is done in English?
English.
Okay.
So how many faculty members do you have?
We have 10.
We have 10.
Out of which 6 are monastic members and 4 are like Subir.
I am half monastic. Because I don't take any salary. Yeah. I get it from the government. Some fellowship, superannuated people, like I had a national professorship for 2 years and some fellowship. So our rule says I get half my salary as a pension, right?
Okay.
I can get only another half from the government. That is the maximum I am allowed. So those things are in any case roughly cover my, so basically it's become my full salary. And so naturally I cannot take from here. Moreover, I didn't want to take it from here. I came here, okay, I will not take salary. And then all this nomination went and I got the fellowship. So I got the full salary. So it's first I came here no salary because I didn't want to go to IIT. But Ajit Diwan wanted me to go to IIT Bombay. So they had a program for 5 years for people like us, whom they want. So I could have continued there, but I said no. And he's also kind of inspired me to come here. I wanted to come and he also facilitated it. That I come after new university and all this. So there is a house. So that's why I'm saying half more, not getting salary from here like you. But they are different. They are very different. They get up very early in the morning and they will get into meditation.
So the students abroad get in touch with algorithms from the undergraduate course or in school level also?
Undergraduate or what?
Or school. Are they exposed to algorithms even in the school level or they get?
Oh, I see. That's a good question. We do not assume that the students have seen algorithms prior, but some of them have actually.
But they have programming courses for students.
So they have, it's a funny thing, okay, so from the better schools, this is true, but we have students who come to our university who have never seen computer programming, after, coming out of high school. And we have to teach them from, first principles. But I would say that most people have had at least programming, and from the very top, schools, they will actually have seen algorithms. Some of them actually, they've, dynamic programming, greedy algorithms, divide and conquer, NP completeness, but these are the very, very, very top, the magnet schools. This is very unusual.
Even our school program, we want at most have programming, right?
Yeah. They don't have algorithm, but they learn programming all across all sciences students.
You see, that's all boys, this class 11, 12, they know programming very well.
Yeah.
That part they know.
Huh.
Do they also like concepts in data structures? So usually I know those who learn programming, they also learn about trees, compute, stack, basic concepts in data structure.
Here at school level, usually computer science is like an optional, like an additional subject. So those who have to take it, like I myself have never done any programming before I joined my bachelor's.
What is the current language is very much in demand? So yeah, you have a book on with Goodrich, right?
Yeah, but that was really an old language, C++. Nobody, well, I should say, actually a lot of corporations use it, but it's not frequently taught in a lot of schools. We don't teach C++ to our students. They learn it on their own. We teach Java as the first language. We teach, I think, Python as a second language, and then we have a course where they cover a whole bunch of kind of, Ruby, not Ruby, they keep OCaml and a bunch of others, kind of, variations of.
Do all of you know Python?
Yes.
Python you know. So what are the other languages you know generally? All of us, not one. C double plus. C. Right, what is the difference between C and C double plus?
C++ was supposed to be the object-oriented version.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so C++, object-oriented concepts, classes, and things like that.
So,
and then Java was basically somebody said C++ is just way too complicated. Let us clean it and simplify it, and that's what created Java. So it had that same flavor as C++, but much simpler. Do any of you guys know C#? No. Okay.
So you using .NET in website?
Yeah, that's right. It's a Microsoft product, which was designed to be, again, kind of a Java variant of, kind of like C. And
we actually did some visual programming on C#. And Visual Studio.
Visual Studio, okay. I'm familiar with it because I teach a course in game programming that uses Unity, and the basic language that Unity is this game programming engine, and it uses C# as the basic language. But the Python, I think, is very important. Like all of our machine learning courses assume, that people are strong in Python. I mean, we assume basically knowledge of probability and statistics and Python are sort of the prerequisites for most machines.
So some universities in the US, they have started a separate department for machine learning. So how big is the focus in your respective universities? Especially, like I'd like to know the focus on say reinforcement learning compared to machine learning compared to deep learning. How is the distribution?
So I'll tell you the problem. The problem that we have is we just cannot keep faculty in this area. We keep hiring more and more people in machine learning, and they keep leaving to go to other places because there's such a demand for these things. So, even though the number remains roughly constant, even though the people themselves actually, turn over. So, so I would like to tell you that we have like a much larger group in machine learning, but in spite of our efforts to try to grow that group, we can only maintain, kind of roughly the same size. But you're right. It's a topic that everybody is just crazy about these days, and we
Why? What is the reason?
It's just that, yes, there's just been, it's a combination of things, okay? So first off, you have access to huge amounts of data that were not available, when we were working as graduate students. You just don't have that huge amount of data. And then the idea that you can solve problems just by rather than throwing ingenious algorithms at it, what you do is you have very primitive algorithms, right? You have neural nets and things like that. But you throw incredible amounts of data at these things, and poof, you have these systems that can suddenly identify, is this person, what is the emotional, state of this person in the photograph? Or I can read, language, and I can understand is this person involved with, some kind of nice speech or some hate speech? These things are coming out by just using massive amounts of data. But the problem for people doing research is we don't have access to this data, right? You have to have a relationship with some kind of corporation in order to get access to this data. It's got to be data, and it's got to be nicely labeled and annotated. And so it's difficult to do research in this area unless you have a corporate connection that will be able to give it to you. But then the problem is once you have the corporate connection, like Amazon gives you the thing and you're doing good work, then Amazon hires you. They say, hey, I'm going to pay you twice as much or 3 times as much as you're getting at the university. And so
they are all of the faculty members also.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the problem. If you're successful, then there's a very good chance that you're
incentives.
Yeah.
The annoying thing is that no one really understands how it works.
That's the problem. That's why theoreticians hate it, because there is no theory to a lot of this.
But I'll tell you one, the student's body in computer science, Maryland says, no matter which area you are doing your specialization, never leave University of Maryland without taking a course from David Long. Student advice to other students, never leave the university without taking a course from this thing, but you should learn something. Okay, ask you a question.
Sir, when I studied my undergraduate, 3 years undergraduate, I have seen they mainly focus in 2 languages, one is C and C++. So for entire 3 years, I have studied only these 2 languages and a small bit of C, shell scripts and this. So right now, I am working with Python a bit, and I have seen that we can solve some problems more efficiently in Python. So do you think they should change their system? They should replace C and C++ with Python and...
They means?
The education system.
Education here in India.
No, not in India. Actually, where I passed my undergraduate, they only use C and C++. So do you think they should replace the C and C++ with Python or Java or something else?
Well, I'm no expert, but I can just tell you that in the USA, so C is not uncommon. C++ is, it depends on the institution. It's not commonly taught, but Java and Python, I would say, are very commonly taught in the USA. Now, whether that's going to, that trend is going to continue or not, I don't know. But you're right, there is an advantage to taking the courses that, like most other people take, because it means that, lecture notes are going to be written in that form and so forth. I would also tell you, though, by the way, that there's a certain philosophy that says that once you have learned 2 significant programming languages, you should be able to teach yourself the rest. In other words, if a student says, I don't know Python, I would say, okay, during the winter break, you learn Python. In other words, the idea is you should, once you understand the basic concepts of how to, what is a procedure, what is a loop, what is a conditional, what is a, class and things like that, what are methods. Then the idea is I should be able to learn any programming language on my own.
Right, so it doesn't really matter, it's only the principles of programming. So along the years, these languages have been, I've seen the languages change. Like when I was a student, we studied Pascal.
Yes, okay. And when I was a student, we studied Fortran. That's just older than you.
So I never got to see those things too.
You're such a young guy.
Pascal.
Pascal, okay, good.
At least Pascal, so quite old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you?
Yes.
Oh, that's why, yeah, you should learn Pascal, but not this boy. For them, Pascal, they never heard the word Pascal.
Pascal really got the past.
We learned 3 languages. Pascal,
Do you think this will? This laptop?
Yes, Pascal.
There's one professor at Maryland who still teaches Lisp to his class. He loves Lisp.
Nice.
Do you think this laptop has changed this programming structure to some way, or is machine embedded, or is it natural? Machine didn't force some language preference, right?
I don't know about the, well, okay, so there's some things which are true, which is, you know, so Python became possible because of two things. One is that you developed lots of, you know, libraries for, you know, that before, you know, people did not have it. You wanted a stack, you implemented your own stack, you know, but modern programming languages now provide lots and lots of different data structures and things like that for you to use. The other thing is the speed, right? Python is an interpreted language. The reason that people studied C and C++ is they just needed a huge amount of speed, and interpreted languages, Java was kind of semi-interpreted, you know, and Python is like fully interpreted language. They were just too slow to solve interesting problems. Nowadays, computers are so fast that, you know, you could use an interpreted language to, you know, to solve these problems very efficiently. But again, when I was, you know, doing like little Fortran programming, I remember if you have like an n-cube time algorithm, forget it. It would just take too long to run. And there we were not using a laptop, right? You had to submit it to the computing center at the university, and they had a time limit. You know, if your program took more than, you know, 10 seconds to run, then they would just terminate the program. They would assume it's in an infinite loop, and so they would stop it. Yeah, so that is the difference that you know, at least one of the differences that modern machines make, I would say. But the other things that you have are these, you know, you have these nice interactive editors for programming languages. You type in a part of the line, you type in half of the variable name, and then you just hit, you know, whatever, space or return, you get the other half of the variable name there. In our days, we were using these card punches, right? And we wanted to keep our variables short, I, J, and K, because you didn't want to write out long variable names, otherwise you'd make a mistake. Yeah, but these things are all very helpful, I guess.
So why do you think that the loop variables used all over the world is I, J, and K?
That's the answer to this question. What's the Fortran rule?
Because we had to type in all of our variable names. If we mistyped a variable name, right? You know,
that's it.
Nowadays, right? Your IDE will underline it and say this is not a declared variable or something like that. In the old days, you would go and submit your program, and then you'd come back an hour later, and then it would tell you, oh, you misspelled your variable, you know. And so you have to change it, you'd have to resubmit it, and, you know, another hour would be lost. So, yeah. Technology is making life so much easier.
Nowadays, they point out.
Yeah.
Students doing any courses or projects on Android or
Yes, that's a very popular course we have. We have a course called Android Programming. And yes, in fact, it's really neat because I know very little about the subject, I must say. But, you know, for example, with 4,000 students, one of the problems we have is students have to wait during office hours to get to a TA. So one of the students wrote this little app that does a scheduling with the teaching assistant. Basically, when you want to meet the teaching assistant, you know, you hit a button saying, I want to meet the teaching assistant for this course. And then what occurs is you're put into a queue, and when that teaching assistant is available, he hits the button saying, you know, bring in the next student, and then it sends a signal to your phone saying the TA is ready to see you now, so you don't have to stand in line waiting to talk to the teaching assistant. And that was done by one of the students at the university. I thought it was a very nice thing. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's actually, you know, these, you know, software for little handheld devices. It's viewed as kind of a light topic, but I think it's one that can be very useful. You can definitely design things that are, you know, would be useful right away for your classmates. You know, I think what a lot of our students hope for is you're going to define you know, you're going to be the guy who's going to design a game. You know, I don't know what people play here, but, you know, Angry Birds or, you know, Flappy, what is it called, Flappy Bird or something like that. Yeah, it's like a very simple game that makes you $1 million. A lot of our students are trying to design these little games for things like Pokemon Go, right? Well, I teach this game programming course, and a guy, you know, he designed one of these games as well for his you know, his Android device. And so it's a very popular thing for students to study.
After 2 semesters of solid grilling in the theory, when I ventured to offer this Android programming in the third semester, there are no takers.
Is that right?
They have been completely bought out by the theoretical subjects.
Ah,
But they feel that Android programming is a chance thing.
No, it's not. Yeah, Android programming is not going to get you into a good graduate school, unfortunately. It might teach you some good projects.
Good projects.
It might land you some good industry jobs.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Sir, you were talking about game programming a bit earlier, so I'm a big fan of game programming. So, what do you actually cover in that course?
Yeah, so I tell people my course is teaching people to hate game programming because it takes all the fun out of it. Because it's actually, so this is just my course, okay? I think game programming is actually taught in a lot of different universities. But because I'm a computational geometer, I turn my course into computational geometry. Because in game programming, a lot of the stuff you have to do is geometry. So, you have to do things like collision detection. So how do you design data structures to do efficient, if I have 1,000 objects that are moving around in space, how do I determine their collision efficiently? I have to design good spatial data structures to do that. There are certain mathematical things, like if I want to rotate objects in three-dimensional space, this is done by quaternions, okay? So I teach quaternions in my class and mathematics behind quaternions. And then there are things like navigation, like finding shortest paths or finding collision avoidance paths and things like that. Yeah. So my class turns out to be a lot of geometric algorithms. And the students, my most frequent comment is, I wanted to learn about game programming and you taught me computational geometry. So, yeah. But I would say that, there are a lot of courses that are taught in the US. Some of them are much more, actually in my class, students they program in Unity, they design their own game projects and things like that. And there's some very cool games. If you visit my webpage, you can actually see a link and it'll show you all the videos from these projects. I have the students do these things. But different schools cover different things. Like some of them cover a lot of art. How do you do art and design? And some other schools cover things like audio. Virtual reality is very popular. So how do you do like head, tracking of the head and motion and things like that. And then some schools cover things like networking, online algorithms. Some schools cover things, very practical things like business things. Like how do I go and develop a business plan for my game and things like that. I do not, I'm more of a theory guy, so I cover more algorithms. But it's a very fun course then.
Is it, is it a beginner grade course or intermediate or something like that?
It's a senior level course, but it's not a required course. It's kind of viewed as a course that students take because it's more of an elective course, but it still is very popular, as you can imagine. A lot of people want to learn how to build games. You played enough games, right? You wasted enough of your life playing games. You might as well learn how to actually program.
Make others waste.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything?
What should be the actual way to learn algorithms to masters in algorithms? Because everybody learns algorithm, but only some can do well in that.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Now, do we need mathematic problem solving skills? What kind of a skill is needed for good algorithm design? I think that's some kind of a question, right? What are the basic skills that are needed? Algorithm itself is a basic skill, but even going just beneath the carpet, what would be required for even algorithmic thinking?
It's a very good question. I think that, so one of the main things that you see that people are good at doing algorithms is what I would call problem solving skills, right? So one of the things that you do, when you're, for example, I think of things like problems that come up in things like the mathematics Olympiads and programming, competitions and things like this. Is you get a problem, and somehow there has to be some interesting, you have some basic ingredients, things that you know how to do. I know how the stack works. I know how Q works. I know some basic things about bit manipulation. And the question is, how do you put these things together to come up with a good solution? But I don't know, how does one develop, these problem-solving
This is a
skills.
very difficult question.
It can only be developed by solving problems.
I think a large part of it is practice.
Right. Practice helps. Practice helps a lot.
So maybe in essence we can say that even people who are good at designing algorithms haven't exactly yet figured out the algorithm for
The algorithm for designing algorithms. Yeah, so I guess when that's done, then we're out of work.
I remember in 1986 when we had this SOCG conference in IBM Doctor. So I was with another one that was going through the corridor, and there's this huge database management professor, DATE, D-A-T.
CJ Date.
CJ Date.
Okay.
The database guy.
Okay.
He has all these databases. So I was crossing the room was little open. And I saw the whole room is so disorganized. Stacks of papers on the floor, stacks of this thing. I said, how come this man teaches the database management? What the world?
No, actually that's the hard disk space. You saw the hard disk space, not the application space. The application is there in his mind, where everything is organized.
Yeah, that's the thing. You should have asked him. I knew a guy who had the same thing. He had papers all over his desk. In fact, it was even crazier. It wasn't stacks. It was like a pile. It looked like someone just tossed the papers over the desk. And then I asked him something about a problem, and he says, "Oh yeah, yes. In 1972, there was a paper on this subject." And then he goes, "Where is it?" And then he goes like right into the stack and like yanks out. It's like, no, it's not this one. And then he goes into the stack and it's like, here it is, And I was going, okay, this guy, although he's got a pile here, he somehow has he's got a database.
It's a good indexing.
Yeah, he's got his own index, dynamic index.
So do you think randomization is more preferable in most of the cases in algorithms, or very few cases in algorithms?
Randomization, I mean, it's certainly very heavily used these days, It's an interesting thing because I think, people would, if you are able to find a simple deterministic algorithm, you would like to do that. But many times when a deterministic algorithm does not, present itself, you need to use randomization, and oftentimes, sometimes the simplest algorithms, come about by randomization.
Yeah, the algorithms themselves are usually much simpler. The analysis is sometimes very difficult, but for practical usage, randomization is good.
So is this good for most of the cases or very few number of cases?
Yeah, it depends a lot on the problem that you have as to whether randomization helps. But if I look at just, if I want to pick up a proceedings of, conference like SOTA or something like this that covers just, a book with lots and lots of algorithms. I would say a very large fraction of the, algorithms will be, will involve randomization in some form or another. Yeah, and some people make an entire career just out of analyzing, the difficult thing with analyzing, randomized algorithms is you have to have a good understanding of probability theory.
Yes.
And the tricky thing in all probability theory is dependence, right? As long as things are independent, everything is beautiful. If I can toss an independent coin. The tricky thing is a lot of algorithms, there are natural dependencies that occur. And somehow trying to figure out how to deal with dependencies or analyze dependencies or control dependencies and things like this are very important. And that's where a lot of the difficulty of randomized algorithms comes.
But one common trick that is used heavily is even if things are not really independent, you can still use linearity of expectations. So you can express it as different, even dependent variables, and then the sum of their expectations.
It's a funny thing. When I was young, I remember when we first saw randomized algorithms in graduate school, I remember that there were a lot of people who really hated this. They kind of said, if you're using randomization, it means you're not being very smart. If you're smart, you should be able to somehow avoid the randomization. But then there were a number of examples that showed that there were very simple randomized algorithms where the best deterministic algorithm was much more complicated. And the other thing was that, you know, if you can show that your randomized algorithm has a probability of failure that is like, you know, 1 over n to the 5th power or something like that, the idea is, gosh, you know, why should I worry about the, you know, the very, very low probability that this thing might fail? In fact, many times failure is not, you know, even if the algorithm gives you the wrong answer, it just tells you, I've made a mistake. You need to run the algorithm another time to get the answer again. So,
I think that there are also examples where randomized algorithms are the most efficient, or the more efficient in the deterministic counterpart. So there are no known deterministic algorithms that match the running time of the randomized algorithm.
So what mathematics courses are included in your undergrad syllabus in your college?
Oh, it's a very big course. A lot of courses. So it's a very general question, you know. It's very difficult. As a specific to computer science, you have any other question? Course as a list of courses.
No, as a fundamentals to computers.
but I would tell you that, yeah, so discrete math is very important. Probability and statistics. You know, I wish I'd taken much more of that stuff. I kind of slept through it. Because I kind of thought, who needs this stuff? It was just a requirement. But I wish now that I had studied all that stuff. Linear algebra, if you want to do anything related, actually, so geometry and a lot of, you know, data science, machine learning stuff, very heavily involved with machine learning. I'm sorry, linear algebra. That stuff is extremely important. If you do geometry, I would say multivariate calculus, you know, is extremely useful to have. So all of these courses. And again, one of the courses that I slept through, it was just for me, it was just an elective, was abstract algebra. And then, you know, groups, fields, rings, and things like this. I kind of thought, okay, I'll never use this stuff again. This is why they call it abstract, right? It's not practical. But then the funny thing was, you know, when I became a grad student, I had to work on a problem, and then I realized right away, if I'm going to solve this problem, I desperately need to know everything I could about abstract algebra. So the good thing about mathematics is unlike technology, right? Machine learning is hard today, but it may not be hot 10 years from now. But mathematics, whatever you learn in mathematics will serve you, the rest of your entire life.
I think we have to go now.
Okay.
Can you tell us something about the research going on in graph theory, current research topics in graph theory?
In graph theory?
Yes.
Graph theory, graph algorithms.
Graph theory.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah,
how many?
Graph theory is a wild zoo, so you can chase any animal.
It's very big.
He is right. Again, if you look at like the SOTA proceedings, the number of papers on graph algorithms is very large, and it's a huge diversity of topics. Yeah.
Sir, I know several people who study just BTech from any IITs, or then they directly pursue their PhD. So as Professor mentioned that he always suggests to pursue an MTech from IIT.
Yeah.
So do you think it's a big issue if I complete my masters from here and then if I go and pursue some PhD? So will it be a really big issue?
It's not so much an issue, it's a question of whether you get admitted or not. So the problem is that the admissions process is very competitive. Like at University of Maryland, I think we admit maybe 1/10 or so of the number of applicants. So it's a very small fraction. And so the difficulty is that you want something to kind of, to put you at the top of the list in terms of the applicants. And so this might be the reason for it.
One of the reasons. Another thing is the speed and the pace and the coursework pressure is so much, you must be much more prepared for that. So you need some more preparing time. Two-way, getting admission is one difficulty and preparing period. So what I want is that you spend 1 or 2 more years for preparation, and also that will tell you whether to go for PhD or whether to go to the industry. So it's a kind of intermediate zone. You need extra 1 or 2 years to assess yourself. It's you to decide. Take more time to decide, not that I have a MSc, I rush. That is it. Okay, I think, thank you very much. Thank you all. We have to move on. He has a lecture at ISI in the afternoon. So we have to get back. Tomorrow both of morning they are leaving. So this is the only slot I could get from them, that before lunch come here and spend time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good luck to you all.
Yes.